The first ever male sexual drug was FDA approved under emergency use authorization. Mm-hmm. So erectile dysfunction was a national emergency given the same...
I'm so sorry. I guess it could be considered a national emergency. I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
When I'm raring to go and it's just like,
Right.
I'm like, do you need a Snickers bar or something? Like what? What? Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hot and Bothered with Melyssa Ford. I am your host, Melyssa Ford, and I am so excited about the guest that I have coming to talk to you guys today. Her name is Dr. Somi Javaid, and she is a rock star in these menopausal streets, okay? So guys, listen, for the men, you can totally tune into this episode, okay? Especially if you have a wife, a sister, an aunt, a mom who is going through perimenopause or menopause, just so you have a little bit more understanding as to this transitional phase in a woman's life. Now, for all you women out there, even women who have not hit their perimenopausal years, trust me when I say, I wish that I had known what was coming down the pipeline. So this episode is for you. And for my perimenopausal and my menopausal girlies out there, my menopause, if you will, this episode is for you because Dr. Somi Javaid is standing on the frontier of an explosion of what menopause and the understanding of this transitional phase in a woman's life is going to become. She is the founder of HerMD. It's a comprehensive women's health practice that is revolutionizing the future of women's health care. She is a pro-aging advocate. She is a wife. She is a mother. She is a board-certified OBGYN with over 25 years of experience under her belt. She is an expert and she is an incredible woman. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear everything that she's got to say. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Somi Javaid. Okay, guys, I told you in the intro how excited I am about this guest. You have no idea the amount of scheduling conflicts that we've been going through, but she made it happen. I am wildly excited about this guest. She is a hot commodity right now. I'm sitting with Dr. Somi Javaid. How are you, my love?
I am so lovely today. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to have you. Like I told you guys, she is a board-certified OBGYN. She's also a leading women's sexual health and menopause expert. She is one of the leading experts who is featured in The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause, a documentary produced by PBS. It is everywhere. If you haven't seen it, then you have to log on to pbs.org in order to check it out. It is one of the, if not the most informative, groundbreaking documentaries about menopause to date. Because up until this moment, it has been like a little secret that every single woman in this world goes through, but we can't actually talk about it. And she's also the founder of HerMD. It's a comprehensive women's health practice that is revolutionizing the future of women's health care. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I just want to do just a brief introduction of who is Dr. Somi Javaid. I just want to let the audience know who is sitting in front of them, and then we're going to go from there.
Ooh, I love this question, and I love when I get to answer it myself. I'm a disruptor.
Love that as an identifier.
Yes, that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into that.
And a girl boss, because red shoes.
Red shoes.
Listen, power.
I knew it when I walked in. I'm an advocate, an entrepreneur, a world traveler, a lover of life, a 20-year OBGYN, God. The founder of HerMD. I sit on a lot of medical advisory panels. I do a lot of clinical research. I'm a speaker. I'm a teacher. Sexual health and menopause expert, and I have a passion for survivorship as well. Mm-hmm. Mama to 3 human beings, 2 dog babies, a wife, a world traveler, and a foodie.
Those are fantastic identifiers. Just a little bit of a sidebar, just because I'm always talking to my audience about books that I'm obsessed with. And one of the books that I read, and I read it frequently because it's one of those that you can never let go of. It's full of dog-eared pages and highlighted sections. It's called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And chapter 4 is Who Are You? And what it does is it forces you to think about who you are past your identifiers. You know, we're so quick to say, oh, well, I do this for a living, or I'm a wife, or I'm a mother, or whatever the case is. But I really like the identifiers that you've assigned to yourself, because they show just how dynamic of a woman that you are. And you're not defined by being a mom, being a wife, or even being a doctor. No.
I'm a forever student.
That's what I also love as well. I tell everybody who listens, I am intellectually curious. That is the purpose of being on this planet. The minute that you stop being intellectually curious is the moment that you actually die. But it could be 20 years from the day that you're interred.
I had the same attitude practicing medicine. I taught every day, but I learned just as much every single day. And that's why I love the world and I love traveling, because I feel like the world is the biggest classroom we could ever have.
Tell me, before we get started, tell me about your favorite place that you've ever traveled.
Botswana.
Tell me why.
The feeling and the experience of watching elephants walk by are tense. It made me feel so small, and my problems were so small, and I love that feeling.
I had the same moment when I was in Bali, maybe a couple of different moments. I ended up there during Ramadan. And I was jet lagged. So of course I wake up at like 4:00 in the morning, and it was a full moon, and the moon was like glistening off of the pool and the rice fields next to my villa. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm looking up at the sky, and it's ink black with all of these stars and the full moon. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm appreciating the fact that I've made it to Bali. It was a 24-hour, excursion from, door to door. And at that moment, the call to prayer started. And it was such, I don't even know what an esoteric kind of ethereal kind of moment, where I just felt at that moment, my physical being is just a husk, and I'm literally a spiritual being sitting in the seat of consciousness. I got very deep on that, but I love those moments where you feel just how tiny you are and how grand the world is and how majestic it is.
But I also think it brings us together, and you realize commonality versus differences. When I took my children to Tanzania, we took them to a school. The kids did not share a language, but they danced and they sang and they laughed
and
together.
And
they ate for 2 hours. And it didn't matter that no one understood a word that they were saying to each other. And so it's those moments that fill my soul.
Same. That's that's one of the main reasons why I like to travel. I love to absorb myself in other people's cultures and especially eat food. Because Anthony Bourdain had it all figured out, that we can disagree on every single thing, but what we can agree on is we both got to eat.
Yes.
And so we can maybe discuss these differences and find commonalities over a meal. So that's why Parts Unknown was one of my favorite shows ever and ever and ever. I still go back and watch the episodes. So traveling, food, same page.
Absolutely.
Same page. So what I want to do is I want to jump into your early years, because there's certain fields of medicine that are so specific that people probably want to ask you, so why was that your choice of medicine? I think that proctologists might get asked that a lot, maybe podiatrists as well. Yeah. And then maybe third on the list might be OBGYNs. It might be an assumption because you're a woman that would make sense, but it is a very specific field of medicine to go in. And most people think that doctors make boatloads of money, but you and I had a conversation about OBGYNs and why there's literally a whole kind of developing in an incentive for medical residents to want to, choose that as their field. So talk about your early years and your desire to become an OBGYN.
So I literally got the call that led to a calling. I was a senior in college, and my father was on the other end of the line. It was early in the morning, and I knew something was really wrong when he was calling me that early. And he's like, Somi, you need to come home. My mother, who was 45 years old at the time, had been complaining for weeks of left arm pain, chest pain, and shortness of breath. And her doctors were like, it's caffeine, your children are stressing you out. And I had flown home a couple weeks ago and looked at her EKG, and I had talked to the cardiologist, and I said, this is abnormal. I learned about this. This is angina. This is ischemia. And he was like, I bet all the money in the world there's nothing wrong with your mother. She went in for a cardiac catheterization, ended up coding on the table. Went in for emergent life-saving quadruple bypass surgery.
At 45?
At 45 and like 104 pounds.
Wow.
When the surgeon came out, he said that the widowmaker, or the LAD, the big vessel, was 95% occluded. And if she...
Which means clogged. Okay.
Clogged, along with 3 other vessels. If the heart attack would have come, she would have not survived. That's why they call it the widowmaker. Except you usually see it in men. And that I was pre-med. I knew I wanted to go to medicine, but that was my aha moment, that I was going to change the world and I was going to be an advocate for women. And so fast forward, went into, medical school and residency and got my first big girl job and got a big smack in my idealistic face when I realized how broken our healthcare system is and was.
I actually wanted to talk a little bit about that defining moment because, we all have that defining moment that leads us down the path of, what we deem our purpose to be, whether it's professionally, spiritually, or otherwise. I wanted to ask about that defining moment and your idealism, because when we're young, we are so idealistic. And I love the fact that you said, I wanted to change the world, because I literally have that written down. We tend to be very idealistic and have visions of changing the world. Compare your youthful idealism to your current state of mind as it relates to the OBGYN field of medicine.
Ooh.
I know, right? Loaded.
Because
there's 20 years in between, correct? 20 to 25 years?
And so this is what I'm going to tell you. I am still passionate and a dreamer and an entrepreneur. And I swore that the current state of medicine and all of my negative encounters were not going to change me at my core. I'm smarter. I'm savvier. I have a Rolodex of learnings, but I use every opportunity, every failure, every obstacle as a learning, not as a, oh my God, I'm going to give up. Because to me, the mission, the stories, the people, it's just too important.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your patients. From my own personal experiences, from my girlfriend's experiences, when we, get in our little circle, brunch, etc., and even from fans and supporters, I hear and have experienced my own horror stories when it came to going to the OBGYN. Sometimes you have an awesome one. They're super cool, and they also don't dismiss your questions and concerns. They really talk to you and try to educate you on your body. It is wild to me how many women don't really understand their own personal physiology, as it relates to during our childbearing years, and then afterwards in our perimenopausal and menopausal years. So maybe you can speak to how you handled, because I know that you're out of patient care now and you're really just in the field of education, but talk to me about when it came to handling patients and over the course of years, what you learned and applied to your, professional kind of acumen in dealing with patients.
So the healthcare system was failing not only female patients, but also providers. And so the healthcare system is broken, rendering delays in care, needless suffering, And providers, particularly female providers, despite having better outcomes with patients, they're leaving medicine, they're being chased out. And so I needed to find a solution that was both patient and provider centric.
What does that mean, being chased out as a provider?
So women are leaving medicine because there is a huge gender pay gap. There's lack of mission-driven work, and that's very important to female providers. And there is an inability to have work-life balance. They tend to have more demands at home, and they can't climb the medical corporate ladder and get into those decision-making rooms because they're penalized for taking time off if they want to have babies.
You know,
I can feel the anger radiating. Or the passion, I should say.
Well, here's what happened, honestly. I have been healthy my entire life. Literally, I want to say the first real situation in which, like, or health issue that I had in which I was hospitalized was when I had a car accident at the age of 41, 42. It was in 2018. But prior to that, I really had absolutely no interaction with doctors other than yearly physicals, yearly dental visits, yearly PAPs and physicals, et cetera, et cetera. So I was healthy my entire life. And then perimenopause came. I was not prepared for perimenopause, so I did not realize that everything that was happening to me, the lack of concentration, the brain fog, the anxiety, depression, the night sweats, the inability to regulate my own temperature and just waking up 6 and 7 times a night, suicidal ideations, hair loss, nail brittleness, crypt keeper-like skin. I did not tie all of that into, oh, this is the transitional phase. It's beginning right now. And boy, did it kick my ass. It was swift and it was harsh. And at that time, my PCP, she was younger than me. And so she really couldn't offer me any kind of solace or even education as to what I was experiencing. It was a very disorienting time, and it's very, very scary as well. And what I realized is that while going through perimenopause and then discovering how dismissed and ignored women are by and large by the medical community after our childbearing years, boy, have I been in a constant state of rage. Because constant.
The medical community has made us invisible patients. And it's not to make you feel any better, but here I am, a menopause expert, and perimenopause has kicked my ass as well, because there's such a discordance between what's described in the medical literature, mild feeling of being hot versus
hot flashes. You'll be fine. Just get a fan and get on an antidepressant.
Yes. Meanwhile, palpitations, anxiety, feeling like you're losing your mind, pacing, my hair is soaked. I'm like, what is this? I thought I was having a heart attack like my mother. Yeah. I had no idea because it was not described appropriately. But nationally, 31% of OBGYN residents are trained in menopause, despite the fact that women will spend 40% of their lifetime in menopause. Last year, we lost $1.8 billion with a B dollars in work-related losses due to undiagnosed, untreated menopausal symptoms. And hell, we are in the prime of our lives when we are in perimenopause, menopause, and we are being forced to miss out on work, or we're leaving work because we're not getting diagnosed, and we're not teaching doctors how to recognize the symptoms, diagnose and treat, and offer patients evidence-based solutions.
When it came to your medical training, how much time was spent, during the academic years and residency years? How much time was spent focused on, on menopausal training?
So I trained for 12 years in women's health.
But the average OBGYN, how much training are they given?
Oh, no. So I had 12 years total, but less than a month was dedicated to menopause.
I've heard it's literally like 20 hours at best, a weekend.
And well, some get
Nothing.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And so, well, historically, if you think about it, women were looked at as vehicles for male pleasure.
Under his eye.
Ooh, I got in trouble for referring to that once on an interview.
I'll do it for you.
Yes, no, I love it. I love making trouble. And vessels for birthing babies. And so we have really done a disservice to women after their childbearing years.
I like the fact that you said that during these years is the prime of a woman's life. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is, kind of a misnomer as to what that actually means. Most people think prime means prime sexuality,
mm-hmm.
Prime for childbearing. But I don't think that people really truly understand what the prime of somebody's life actually means. Mm-hmm. What do you think that it means? And I'll piggyback off of that.
For me, it's listening to women over 2 decades, and the women who are in perimenopause and menopause, and we've got their symptoms under control. They're not worrying about getting pregnant anymore once they're menopausal. Okay, not perimenopausal.
Basically, that means shoot the club up.
Yeah. They're not climbing. They're at where they want to be with their career, and now they have the chance to be creative at where they're at. Kids are now out of the house, and so they can have sex when they want to have it. Financially, maybe they've reached their goals and they're not chasing and they're not as worried. And so they're in the prime and they have this ability to really contribute from all of the lessons that they've learned.
Mm-hmm. So prime equals freedom.
Oh my God, you said it best.
Yeah. Prime equals freedom. That's where I am right now in my life. I'm in this phase of whatever's for me is for me. I don't feel like chasing a single solitary thing that just feels like I've got to exert any more energy that I want to output. Mm-hmm. I have this enormous sense of self-awareness and self-acceptance that for the first time in my life, I'm like, I really like and love myself. And we talked about this. Mm-hmm. I struggled with that over the course of my entire life because of how I introduced myself to the world, the male gaze, and just literally how female children are born into this world and almost conditioned to feel shame almost immediately just from our mere existence, and how much work it takes to undo that conditioning. And in the prime is literally where that disconnect, kind of leaves us, where we suddenly are like, yeah, no, all that is BS. I'm not buying into that anymore. The freedom is now the way that I choose to think about myself and my concept of self, and that to me is the prime. And they're the greatest years ever. I might not look the way that I looked at 20-something years old. You might not be able to bounce a quarter off of every part of my body, but I have earned all the tiger stripes and the scars and everything that comes along with this version.
And we're freeing the next generations.
We are.
So my teenage daughters, when they get asked, what do you think of what your mom does? Mm-hmm. They're not scared of menopause.
I love that. I love the fact that you're able to have a conversation with them, because we come from the generation, Gen X, where our moms did not talk to us about it, and their moms did not talk to them about it. And so it's shrouded in shame and secrecy, and also just a lack of understanding as to what was going on. And so I feel like Gen X is literally like, okay, look, we walked around with keys around our necks, the latchkey kid generation. We drank from garden hoses. You had to have a commercial that said, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Okay, we are the lost generation. Nobody has told us anything our whole lives. We had to read 32 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica to figure anything out. And now you want us to figure this out? Now we're mad. Now we're mad and we're fed up, and now we have social media, so we have platforms to speak on this. So talk to me about, being a doctor in your earlier years versus now, where menopause is having its moment at the moment that you are experiencing it.
Yeah, so let's take a pause and figure out how the hell did we get here in the first place, right?
Please do.
So what are the barriers? Lack of data. Women weren't mandated to be in clinical research trials until 1993. Just digest that for a moment. So we were using male data to come up with treatment plans for us.
And is the reason that they did not test on our bodies because they felt like our hormones would, which is so ironic because I'm like, that's the point.
That's why we need to know.
Literally the point is you have to be able to have these skewed results because you have to acknowledge that we have more hormones than men do that affect our daily existence.
You used the word that I was going to use, skew. They were afraid that we were going to skew the data, but you are absolutely right. So that's why when you talk about perimenopause, menopause, fibroids, endometriosis, cardiovascular disease, I mean, all of the subsections of female healthcare, there's such a void of data because we weren't mandated to be included in clinical research trials until 1993. Funding, less than 2% of all venture capital funding goes to female founders. Research, so research dollars do not go to us as well. Education. So, there are estimates that up to 40% of women don't know their own anatomy. And doctors aren't trained. Clitoral anatomy was not updated until very recently. Sorry, I went there.
No,
you brought me in
it's
here.
It's not even that. I'm just thinking about all the boyfriends that I've had and how they needed a roadmap. Most of them needed a roadmap to figure out female anatomy. And also the first time I actually took a mirror and looked down, I was like, oh my God, what? They didn't tell me anything about this.
Right.
What?
And so many women call the outside the vagina, and it's not. The vagina is the internal canal. It's where we put tampons. It's where babies come out of. And so women are just not taught. And how are you expected to talk about pleasure or pain or a rash or whatever is going on if you can't describe that body part or your doctor doesn't know about that body part?
Well, by and large, our sexual pleasure is never taken into account at all, ever. It's the conversation around sexual health and wellness is rooted in discussing, the male pleasure center, not us.
Well, that was my next point. I feel like you and I are like on the
We're
same
very symbiotic
wavelength
right now.
Yes. So there's 29 medications for men for sexual dysfunction. And they
And they're all covered by insurance, I think.
Most of them are. There's 2 for women. The first ever male sexual drug was FDA approved under emergency use authorization. So erectile dysfunction was a national emergency given the same.
I'm so sorry. I guess it could be considered a national emergency. I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
When I'm raring to go and it's just like,
Right.
I'm like, do you need a Snickers bar or something? Like what?
What is going on? And wait a second, why don't you have one of the medications that's covered? But for women, the first drug took 6 years to get FDA approved. And to date, less than 5% of providers know about it. Less than 1% of women know about it.
What is this drug?
ADDY. It's ADDYI. It stands for Add Your Interest. It works on neurotransmitters in the brain, and it is FDA approved to treat low desire.
Really? I've never heard of it.
It's called the pink pill.
Okay. I don't need it right now because I'm feeling like I'm having like a resurgence. Like I got a new beau, and he's doing the job.
Good.
My skin's glowing.
And you're happy.
Yeah.
But for a lot of women who have lost that want and because of it, they've lost their own identity because sexual health is way beyond what goes on in the bedroom.
Yeah.
The fact that this drug has been on the market for 9 years and women don't know about it, because when we advertise for women's sexual health, there's no differentiator between porn and sexual health care. And let me say that again. There is no differentiator between porn and female sexual health care beyond contraception, fertility, or infection. Now, if that hasn't pissed you off, I don't know what will.
That does make me very, very upset. It does, because that's another area that it is so easy to shame women for expressing the fact that I don't really need a reason to want to feel sexually aroused and to take advantage of that. Like there is so many ways in which women are made to feel shame for having a natural physiological, biological reaction to something that might arouse them. And it's wildly frustrating.
It's wildly frustrating. And what you just described is the biopsychosocial response to sexual health care for women. You have to take biology, psychology, and social factors into effect. Like, if you're mad at him or her, you're not going to be in the mood, and that's okay. But yes, so pervasive gender bias, whether it's the way we approach women's sexuality, even the nomenclature that we use in medicine is so harmful.
Yeah.
I worked on a project with Peanut, the social group out of London, and we did a renaming revolution. We took all of the words and
what would you say were some of the really harmful words within, the kind of lexicon of, references that are used to describe, women's sexual health? Which ones do you think that were the most harmful?
Incompetent cervix.
I take offense to that.
Yeah, incompetent cervix, for cervix that doesn't. So the cervix is the mouth to the womb, right? We need the cervix to hold a pregnancy in, but some women struggle with that and they will lose pregnancies and the cervix doesn't function.
So would that be like where somebody would need like a cerclage?
Cerclage,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But incompetent cervix, when someone is exhausted during labor, and has been pushing forever. I mean, that's the biggest workout of your life. We call it poor maternal effort.
Oh, these terms are vile.
They're vile.
They're insidious.
Because they're not educational.
Not even a little bit. They're accusatory.
They place blame when you are at your most vulnerable moments in your life. Yeah. So that's the medical system I grew up in. Yet another barrier is time. There was a recent article that an 8-hour day takes a physician 27 hours to complete the work. By the time we see you, examine you, counsel you, chart it, talk to the insurance company, send the medications. So when you feel like you've had a drive-through pap smear, kind of like going through McDonald's, it's not because the doctor doesn't want to care for you. It's because they're stuck in a system that kind of forces this.
It doesn't reward patient care. It doesn't reward bedside manner. It doesn't reward that. It's conveyor belt. Get them in, get them out.
Correct.
And that's unfortunate. I've been through both, where my provider was very conscientious and compassionate and caring and did not make me feel like, okay, great, see you next time. And on the flip side, I had somebody who walked in the room, barely made eye contact. Their exchange was extraordinarily perfunctory. And I was just like left holding the covers up like, what just happened? I almost feel violated, so I've been on both ends of the spectrum, and that's unfortunate. One question I did want to ask you is, like, Big Pharma is always looking for a way to capitalize off of, people's vulnerabilities. Why didn't they see just how massive of an industry menopause would be, and like funding or creating drugs to alleviate symptoms or whatever the case may be? Like, it just seems like that was a real, kind of misstep in judgment, overall?
I think because the WHI, that study that was done over 20 years ago.
And the WHI is?
The Women's Health Initiative study that was done to look at hormones and risks and benefits, put out such myths and did such a disservice. Basically, it scared women of what their bodies produce, right? We told women you're going to get breast cancer, dementia, heart attack, and stroke. And when you actually look at the data, the estrogen, so there was an estrogen arm and then an estrogen and progesterone arm. And it was only oral medication. And the problem was they studied women also 70 to 79.
That's insane.
That's insane. Who had not been on hormone. That's not your typical menopausal patient.
It's not.
And guess what? If you're doing a preventative study, you're not preventing disease at 79. You should have started that 40 years ago.
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole problem with our medical system in the United States, is that we chase disease rather than preventing it. So you have this study, and we rung this bell. Dr. Sharon Malone always says this, and we can't unring it because we called this press conference, but we didn't share that even with that oral conjugated drug that I do not like, that has 17 different molecules of estrogen in it, the estrogen-only arm still showed decreased risk of breast cancer, decreased risk of dying from breast cancer, and overall decreased risk of mortality. We didn't share that. And when we recalculated the data and saw all the benefits for bone, brain, and heart, we didn't call a press conference. So women were deprived of their hormones that their bodies were naturally producing. And guess what skyrocketed? Anxiety medication.
Yes.
Antidepressants.
Yes.
Yes. Because we had to fill the void somehow, some way.
What I want to do is I want to tell the viewer, like, basically the exchange that we just had right now talking about hormones is when you're in your 30s, you're coasting along, everything, let's just say everything's great. You don't have endometriosis, you don't have PCOS, you don't have fibroids, you don't have something that is like completely maligning your entire existence, and making you feel agony and pain, for the at least 50% of your existence. So your hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, and your testosterone, they're kind of coasting along. And then it's almost like, this is your captain. We have begun our descent into Heathrow Airport, et cetera, et cetera. So you just start to feel like, oh, okay, we're feeling a little bit of the decline. It's going down, it's going down, it's going down. It's very gradual, and you shouldn't notice it. I didn't notice it at 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. 42 was the moment in which I felt like the hormones that were coasting, just fell off a building. Fell off a building, and hence all of the symptoms that I described all at the same time. The night sweats, the inability to sleep through the night, the brain fog, the anxiety, depression, the feeling of terror, the heart palpitations, skin, nails, hair, the whole nine. And so that was the point in which I had a gynecologist who listened to me, the compassionate, wonderful human being that he was. And he started talking to me about hormone replacement therapy. And my first instinct was, isn't that cancer causing? Because, like you said, that misinformation was so campaign was so pervasive. It is stuck in our brains. And so before we talk about HerMD, I really want people to understand, the women that are watching this, the women where this is on the horizon for them, or they're knee deep in perimenopause and they haven't been talked to, or they haven't considered HRT, hormone replacement therapy, how necessary it is. For me, it's why I'm stable right now. It's because I started early, in the first signs.
So it's not only necessary. Most women are candidates for it. There are two major buckets. There's systemic, meaning full-blown, it's absorbed into your bloodstream, and then localized, meant to treat genitourinary syndrome of menopause, right? Like sexual pain, vaginal dryness, frequent urinary tract infections. All of these changes happen because of what you alluded to, the decline in estrogen, progesterone. And yes, women need testosterone, just as men do. We just need it in a much smaller dose. And so we know that it's good for our bone. It's good for our brain. It's good for our heart. And if we can get hormone therapy within the first 10 years of menopause, which is the complete cessation of bleeding, or if you've had a partial hysterectomy, getting blood testing to confirm, then we know that it is preventative and also treats those head-to-toe symptoms of menopause that you so elegantly just described.
Yes, I remember being in the thick of it. You know, I remember just like the anxiety, the depression, the suicidal ideations. However, this was, coupled with grief. My mom passed away during this time, so I couldn't tell my ass from my elbow. Is the symptoms that I'm feeling today grief related, or are they perimenopausal related? Because the crazy part is they're very, very similar. Yes. And I feel like the reason being is that most people think that perimenopause and menopause is a gynecological event, but it's mostly up here. And I feel like Dr. Lisa Mosconi, she talks about this in her book, The Menopause Brain, where a lot of the cognitive functions that we rely on just start to kind of, falter and sometimes fail us. And that leads to the feeling of anxiety, depression, and also like we're losing our sanity.
Absolutely. Word finding, mild cognitive decline, not remembering, everyday names. For me, I was on stage and acutely, my speech went garbled and then I couldn't speak at all. Tamsin Fadal talks about not being able to read the teleprompter. The good news is menopause for a lot of women is like an acute withdrawal. Like you were on 6 cups of coffee and then all of a sudden you're not. And with hormone therapy, you can get back to baseline and some even better. And Lisa Mosconi talks about how empathy centers in the brain increase. And so you have greater empathy for other people, but also that feeling of, you know what? I'm okay the way I am, and kind of ignoring the noise. And so there are very positive things that can happen from aging. But I really encourage women to at least, nationally, less than 2% of women are on hormone therapy because of the myths that we have yet to debunk out there. To ask your provider about it, not only to treat your symptoms, but also to prevent disease, because this is the sad statistic. Even though women live longer than men, we live those years in poorer health.
That's a statistic that nobody says. And there is a direct correlation between dementia and Alzheimer's and perimenopause. It's almost like whatever you do during this stage of your life is going to be the determining or a significant determining factor as to what your later years will look like in terms of cognitive sharpness, mental acuity, and that is terrifying because I watched my mom die very quickly from colon cancer, and it made me understand or just come to my own realization that I would much rather experience death that way, quick, and also having all my cognitive functions at that time. Because dementia and Alzheimer's, all of my friends who are now caring for family members and or parents that are going through that, it's literally like the slowest killer in the world. And it's just like, it's robbing you of your sense of self, your identity, and so many women, this is their future because of lack of education around how to treat yourself medically during perimenopause and menopause and how quickly it benefits you to get on HRT.
Right. And the cognitive changes that we know of are distinctly related not to aging, but distinctly related to lack of estrogen. And Lisa Mosconi is doing that work right now. We're trying to figure out the link between that and Alzheimer's, but we definitely know that Alzheimer's disproportionately affects women over men. Yeah. And it's ironic that you said that about the quick death or the quick mortality. That is how usually men die quickly. They have an event and then they die. Women live longer and chronically in poor disease. And I'm a firm believer that for people who are candidates for hormone therapy can prevent a lot of that and increase quality of life.
I'm literally sitting here as a living, breathing example of somebody who tried different ways of using HRT. First, I had the lotions on the forearm, the progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. I'm not meant to dose myself, okay? I was afraid I was gonna grow a beard. Like, I was like, nope, not doing it. You've told me that there's a spray. I don't know anything about that, but I would like to know a little bit more. There was the patches, the estradiol patches that you take, and you take a progesterone supplement at night. And then we talked about the pellet. The pellet is controversial. And it's also a little cost prohibitive. It's not covered by insurance. Usually it's these medi spas that have doctors there that will implant that in the side of your buttock, but it's still slightly experimental, so I don't really want to give a whole lot of information on that, mainly because it's cost prohibitive. It's very expensive and not covered. But the HRT, I feel sane. I feel, and it stopped the dry skin and the brittle nails and the hair falling out in clumps. And it stopped the anxiety and the depression, and also a lot of therapy also helped. But this was definitely a massive contributing factor to me feeling like myself again, better than myself. This new version of myself that is literally like, I like me, and that's really it.
No, people will say that they got themselves back when you put them back on hormone therapy. And so the estrogens, I love the transdermal, so fancy word for not by mouth, but through the skin. And you described it perfectly. I love the spray. That's what I use personally. It's called Eva Mist. It's usually covered by insurance. It's FDA approved. Okay. There are gels, there are patches. Yes, there are pellets. Testosterone is tougher. There is no FDA-approved testosterone-only treatment option. So we either compound it or we give you male formulations at about the 10th of the dose. And we talk about that very well in the documentary. There's also testosterone pellets that you can talk to your provider about if you feel comfortable. But like you said, there's some data to support. There's some data that isn't. So, you'll get a lot of differing opinions, but you have to figure out what's right for you. Yeah. I love transdermal, meaning non-oral therapies. And then most women will take progesterone by mouth. Some women will opt for an IUD. You can use an intrauterine device off-label.
Really?
For uterine protection, absolutely. Particularly if you're perimenopausal. I love it for my patients because they're still using it for contraception. And as they sail into menopause, because that's how we're going to do it with hormone therapy, they can use that in place to counteract the effect of the estrogen. Yes.
So I want to ask you about that because I did not know that. So I had an IUD. It was to prevent pregnancy. So I got mine implanted. I must have been 28. I always wonder what my life would have been like if I never got it, because that thing was like Fort Knox, okay? Nothing was getting through that sucker. And it was the non-hormonal one. It was the 10-year one. So it was non-hormonal. Doc, I kept that thing in for 17 years.
Okay.
The string eroded. They had to go in with like a whole crew to go get this sucker out, okay? But it's finally gone. Yes. I don't have her anymore because why? I don't get my period really anymore. Like when that girl shows up, I'm like, who are you and why are you here?
So I should have made that clear. It's the hormone-containing IUD, not the copper IUD that you're alluding to.
Yeah.
Because it releases hormone and it delivers it right to the uterus to counteract the effect of the estrogen. Because we don't want to give you just straight estrogen if you have a uterus in place, because we can cause precancer or cancer of the uterus if we just stimulate that lining. And so you're given prometrium for balance, but a lot of women will report sleeping better and feeling better when they take their progesterone as well. And then testosterone has really been proven to help with all the domains of sexuality. So libido, orgasm, arousal,
working out.
Yes.
Just a sense of vitality and energy.
Yes. We need more data. There's a lot more on men, obviously. Weight loss, things like that are definitely, we see an overall improvement just clinically when we put people back on testosterone. But the key with testosterone is like you said, so you don't grow a goatee, and have acne like when you were 15, is you want to get back to physiologic dosing.
Yes.
Meaning, you want to get back to female levels if you identify as female, and you're not trying to go for male level dosing. And I think that's where people get stuck.
And this requires you to really interact with your medical providers so that they can take your blood work, and they can analyze where your levels are, and so they dose you properly. This can't be just like, oh, let me just get a shot.
Yeah.
Because
and
people
follow your symptoms and your improvement and how are you feeling. Yes.
Yeah.
I once had a patient who came from an outlying institution and she had road rage and wanted to kill her husband. And I said, okay, well, let's back off on the testosterone a little bit.
Well, wait, I have road rage and I oftentimes feel murdery. So
maybe we need to check your testosterone levels.
I know, I want it. It helps me through boot camp, okay? And sometimes I need my anger and my rage, okay? Sometimes it just is the fuel. It's like my caffeine.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you. Yes.
Okay, so talk to me about HerMD. What was the defining moment in which you felt like, okay, nobody's doing this. I need to create that comprehensive place where women can come. It's based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yes.
Women from all over the world come to visit you because this is ground zero for coming to understand menopause. It's the foremost in terms of like educating people. Talk to me about the defining moment in which you wanted to create it and where it is now.
Yeah, so I was a professor at an academic institution, and I had done outside training for menopause and sexual health care, and was just listening to story after story of marriages blowing up, self-esteem, rock bottoming, people just desperate for care. And I was practicing doorknob medicine, right? I was seeing 50 patients a day. My hand was on the doorknob saying, yeah, okay. I was like, I felt like a complete failure. I was leaving my children all day. I had, 3 kids at this point, and I was failing as a doctor. And so I said, I'm either going to practice medicine the way it was intended and give patients the care that they need, or I'm going to stay home and raise these babies. And my husband was like, good God, woman, you will drive us all bananas if you stay home. So I cashed in my 401k, my savings. I bought a building. I wrote 3 words on a piece of paper I will never forget: educate, advocate, and empower. I wanted a place where women were true partners in their health care. I wanted providers to know about menopause and sexual health care. They thought I was crazy to open this in Cincinnati, Ohio. We had women from 35 states and 3 countries accessing our model. It was insurance-based. That was the other thing. I did not want to, given what happened to my mother and all the barriers that we discussed earlier, I was not going to put up a financial barrier to care because I don't believe that healthcare is a luxury. I believe it's a right. So then we decided to scale. And that was a
How
whole...
dare you?
As a minority woman from the Midwest.
Right?
Yeah, so then we went into fundraising, and that was a hysterical story because I did not know what that was. I didn't even know what a pitch deck was. And we went out to raise money and raised $10 million in our first round. And to date, we've raised $40 million.
That is impressive.
To open HerMDs around the country. So we service 5 states right now, and we're rapidly growing. But we are menopause, gynecology, and sexual health care centers that are within an insurance-based system.
Tell me about some of the patients that have come to see you, from other countries. Like, what has been their reaction to walking through the doors and finally being seen and heard and understood after years of being dismissed or ignored or, like you said, fed antidepressants and just go on your way. This is a natural phase of life. Suffer through it and do it quietly.
So the first thing they do when they walk in, which makes me so sad about the way women are programmed, is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place, because it's so beautiful. They're like, I am looking for the doctor's office. So they're looking for the fluorescent lights and the paper gown and the stirrups.
And the sterile atmosphere.
Yeah. And so when they see the warm colors and the beautiful spa-like environment, they're taken aback for a second. And I'm like, no, you deserve this. And they say to us, it's the first time we felt heard. It's the first time we felt seen. I got more done in this visit than I have in 20 years of seeing the doctors because we have longer appointment times. And I eradicated a lot of those barriers for providers. So longer appointment times means 15 to 18 patients a day, not 50. They don't take call. They have their menopause and sexual health care training, so they don't feel like they are doing their patients a disservice. And so they tell us stories of how for years they suffered. And now they have evidence-based solutions. And what?
Yeah.
We take their insurance? They're mind-boggled. I'll tell you a quick story of a woman who made me cry and cry and cry. She had a condition called vaginismus. It's the involuntary contraction of the muscles around the vaginal opening. Can happen either provoked or something happened earlier on in life. It can happen from an emotional trigger if you grew up in a household where you were taught sex is bad. And so her and her husband had never been able to have intercourse.
Ever?
Ever. We were ever penetrative intercourse. They did other things for intimacy, but never.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Yeah, no, these are the stories we see. And we were able to make a diagnosis, take her back to our surgical suite, and we'll talk more about what we do, inject with Botox, not for cosmesis, but, because it relaxes the muscles. A couple months later, she came back to us and shared that not only was it wildly successful and that they were intimate. God, where's the Kleenex when I need it? But she shared she was pregnant. And
oh, that's wonderful.
And because we have ultrasound centers, we were able to take her back to the sono suite and see the heartbeat and confirm the pregnancy. And I'll never forget what she said to us. She's like, I couldn't even dream of being intimate. And you guys gave me the gift of becoming a mother as well.
That must have been such an incredible, full circle moment for you.
Every time I have wanted to quit as an entrepreneur and as a doctor of 2 decades.
A patient like that walks through your door.
A patient like that walks through my door or stops me in Nashville or New Jersey and say, oh my God, HerMD saved my life, or it saved my marriage, or it saved my mother's life. And so those are the stories that keep me going.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions for you because I know that you have plans with your son and your husband, and I want to let you go. And I'm so grateful that you were able to sit with me. My second to last question is: I know that you said that HerMD is expanding. It's now in 5 other cities, and you've got I'm sure, a global expansion plan. What does the next 5 to 10 years look like for HerMD?
Oh God, for HerMD. A very large probably expansion plan, partnerships with hospitals, and I mentioned how much we're losing in the workplace. So telehealth expansion, hiring more providers, selling our educational materials so that even in markets where we are not going to go into, we can train those providers. Because right now there's one provider for every 33,000 menopausal patients. And continuing to have educational events and continuing to advocate. And so that's the goal for HerMD.
I'm very, very, very excited for you. And I would really love to come to the flagship HerMD in Cincinnati, come and visit you, check out the facility, and just kind of see the magic that you're doing over there. And you described it so beautifully. I really want to come and see it. It sounds like, Shangri-La.
Well, the thing is, I looked at it as a provider, but also a patient. And so I wanted to make sure that I eradicated all barriers for providers, but also patients. And convenience is one of them. So I was like, let's put imaging and surgery and preventative health care and hormones and phlebotomy, getting your blood drawn, all in one place. They're like, what? I can get my ultrasound down here. And we have surgical suites.
Wow.
So you can have minor surgeries down there as well. And they're not huge. They're 4,000 square feet. You park right in and you walk in, you have your appointment. It's phenomenal.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about your advocacy, But what is some advice that you would give to women who want to take control of their health, specifically around menopause and also around sexual wellness?
I would tell them not to take no for an answer. I would really advise that they find an expert, either through Menopause Society or the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health Care.
Did not know that these even existed, but thank you.
Yes.
And I'm sure they want to say thank you as well. Okay.
And they can find a provider that way who has been trained, because there's not that many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually help founders. I consult with founders because there's so few of us, female founders, and really advocate for them to not take no for an answer and help them raise capital so that they can be problem solvers to this big healthcare debacle, broken system that we have. And I also really am a girl's girl. And I feel like as a minority woman, I have fought really hard to get to this table. And I did not let the door shut behind me. I reached behind and lifted the next woman up and the next woman up. And the day that we stop seeing each other as competition and we collectively raise our voices together is the day that we are going to finally be the change we so desperately need.
Yeah, I find myself having that conversation a lot about women and competitiveness and how it's just such a barrier to us when it comes to just acknowledging that we really, really need each other just throughout, just to kind of have allies in like the most, difficult areas of our lives or just times in our lives, menopause being one of them, the onset of perimenopause. It is so disorienting. It is so confusing, and you feel so alone. It wasn't until I mentioned it to a couple of girlfriends who were older than me that they just started to make sense of what was going on with me. And I was like, is there a book or something I can read? What is happening? And so, yeah, I mean, the competitiveness amongst women oftentimes is to our extreme detriment when it comes to us discovering things about each other and ourselves because of obviously our similarities. So let me ask you this. What is next for you? I know that we talked about the expansion plan of HerMD, but maybe another personal or professional arm, or maybe even just personally.
Oh, no. So I'm writing a book.
Okay.
Not a menopause book, but a book on really overcoming, right? Personal stories that I went through with my own healthcare journey, and then being able to look at it as a provider and a patient, and how I became an entrepreneur and a founder, and even dealing with that whole space. I created something called HerMD University that trained our providers, which was a solve for us, but I'm creating a software as a service platform for all providers because, as you so elegantly mentioned, there's head to toe issues that can happen. So what if you see your orthopod for frozen shoulder and he doesn't recognize that's menopause? I don't want there to be any more delays in care. I'm consulting with other female founders. I'm speaking, I'm teaching, I'm educating and advocating, and and then I'm being a mom and a wife.
And traveling the world.
Yes.
And eating really, really good food.
Yes, for sure. And just learning every single day.
Let me ask you it's not necessarily a random question, but I'm just going to throw it out there because most people associate menopause with hot flashes. That's really it. It's like menopause, hot flashes. I'm like, wait, I'm turning 48. I haven't had a hot flash. Some women never have them. But what is one of the strangest symptoms that most women have no idea is associated with menopause that you have seen, either infrequently or frequently during the course of, your career?
Itchy ears and burning mouth.
Yeah, I get hives everywhere. And I feel like it's kind of also related to a little bit of anxiety, but they are just they'll be like welts across my back and over my stomach, and then they disappear in 30 minutes. I carry tubes of cortisone cream in every bag I have because just in case I break out in hives or itchy ears, tinnitus. Sometimes I see things out of my peripheral that aren't there, hear things that I know aren't there.
Auras. Yeah. And so what happened?
Are we becoming witches? What's happening here? Because I'm fine with that as long as I get to cast spells. Because there's a few mofos that really, honestly, I would come straight for you. I promise you. But
I think for me personally, the hardest symptom I ever had was I was on stage about a year ago and I was speaking, and I've done national TV, I've done TEDx, I'm a professional speaker. I went garbled to not being able to speak at all. And in my head, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I just couldn't say it. I was like, am I having a stroke? It took 4 months to get a diagnosis. And then even longer, I went through speech therapy and treatment. And it came down to perimenopause causing migraines with verbal aura. And the neurologist is like, well, and he was lovely and he actually supported hormone therapy, but he said it's well described. Well, when I put the story up on Instagram, all of my rock star friends, as you say, had no idea that this could happen in menopause, that their patients could appear like they were having a stroke, and said, Somi, are you serious? Like, this is what you've been going through? And I was like, yeah. So I told my neurologist, I said, well, if it's well described, friend, you need to start sharing it with everybody else.
Right.
Because we're not sharing this information. And I thought I had a stroke or a brain tumor as a menopause expert.
yeah. Wow. Well, now you've heard it, that literally if you're in perimenopause, you might end up feeling like you're having a stroke because your speech becomes garbled and what you think is not coming out of your mouth. So now you know it's a frequent symptom that nobody ever talked about.
Nope.
There is a laundry list of symptoms that you can go through, and it's not just hot flashes. Not just hot flashes. Talk to me about your participation in the M Factor, the documentary that is about to hit like a tornado, because I have seen so much promotion for it. Everybody is, well, women, men are like, wait, what's happening? What's menopause? But a lot of women are very excited about this. The rock stars, that's what I'm calling you guys. The rock stars of, the medical field who have been sounding the alarm about menopause for years and years and years. You guys are the rock stars. You guys are the pioneers. You guys are the ones that are the celebrities and the stars of this documentary. Talk about the M Factor and your participation in it, how they asked you to participate, and just the rollout, because you are everywhere right now.
It's pretty crazy. So I DM'd Tamsin Fadal, who is the news anchor, who is one of the executive producers, who was sharing a story on social media. And I said, thank you for doing this, because your bravery leads to my patients' bravery. And they're not as scared when they see a celeb or someone like you in the public eye starting to share these stories authentically. And then she DM'd me right back. We started talking about our shared experiences. She introduced me to her girlfriend, Jo LaMarca Matheson, who was a former Today Show producer, who they both had struggled with their menopause journeys and were starting this documentary. And they're like, oh, we think we're just going to put it on YouTube. They didn't know that 2 years later it would turn into this. And so I'm one of the featured experts to really share my 2 decades of experience and knowledge and advocacy about what's happening in the menopausal space. And it's the first movie to ever get CME, continuing medical education credit.
Wow.
So it's actually going to do something about it. That's what I love. Yeah. It's not just telling you about the problem. It's teaching not only consumers and patients, but it's also teaching providers.
I am so excited about the documentary. By the time this episode airs, it will already be available on pbs.org. So I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already watched it. I'm excited about watching it. It features Naomi Watts, who has been a very vocal advocate, a pro-aging advocate, as well as, a women's sexual health advocate. And I just love her. She's just so amazing. She talks about the fact that she felt like she was told by people that her career would take a hit if she started talking about menopause, because then she could no longer play roles in which she is deemed a desirable woman. Because you can't be going through perimenopause or menopause and be desirable. You can't have, vitality. You can't be looked at as a vibrant woman because, well, patriarchy says so.
So
Misogyny says so, but she is just a rock star.
She's a founder. Mm-hmm. She started a company in this space. Yep. She's a force. We met at an educational event. She saw me speak, and she came up to me afterwards, and she thought it was fantastic about what HerMD was doing in the insurance-based space. And she's like, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, "I'm an Ohio-based girl. I've raised this money. Let me just ask her." I was like, "We're holding an event in April and I need you to be there." And she's like, "Done." And I was like, "Yeah, right. That's going to happen." And guess what? Girlfriend showed up. Not only that day, but over and over again. And she's never asked for a thing in return because she and I are both very mission driven, and we do not want women to suffer.
I love that. And same here. That is the purpose for Hot and Bothered with Melyssa Ford. This is the primary source of information that I want to dispense to my female listener and viewership. Because I went through my own, small version of hell, I was like, there's no reason why any woman should ever have to go through this. This is just not fair. And so I love having the opportunity and creating the platform to be able to talk to women like you who are helping to educate people and educate women on how to, kind of like traverse this very disorienting but spectacular time in our lives. If we do it the right way, it really can be like wonderful.
I love the way you said that. I want people to actually look forward and not dread this time in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm liking a lot of it ever since I was able to get control over it. And so I want people to be able to, feel that they have a sense of autonomy and agency over their bodies, and their bodies are not betraying them. Yeah. So Dr. Somi Javaid, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so lucky to have been able to, squeeze myself into your very, very busy schedule. And for anybody who is in the Cincinnati area or not, if you want to travel and go to HerMD, we're going to put the location and the links in all of our show notes for you guys to be able to learn more about Dr. Somi Javaid and HerMD and all of her initiatives and efforts. Thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.